Christmas Eve, 1945. A night of anticipated joy in Fayetteville, West Virginia. For the Sodder family, it was a night that would shatter their world, leaving behind not just ashes, but an impenetrable void. 5 children, tucked into bed, ready for Santa, simply vanished. Not a trace. Not a single bone. What began as a tragic house fire quickly spiraled into one of America's most perplexing and disturbing unsolved mysteries. A mystery that continues to haunt, decades later, whispering of something far more sinister than an accident. George and Jennie Sodder were Italian immigrants, hardworking and well-respected in their community. They had 10 children and lived in a comfortable, 2-story home on the outskirts of town. On that fateful Christmas Eve, 4 of the older children were out, but 9-year-old Martha, 7-year-old Jenny, 5-year-old Betty, 3-year-old Louis, and 2-year-old Maurice were all asleep upstairs. Around 1 a.m., a phone rang downstairs. Jennie Sodder answered. It was a strange woman, speaking incoherently, with laughter in the background. Jenny, confused, hung up and went back to bed. Barely an hour later, she was awoken again, this time by the smell of smoke and the faint sound of Maurice's cries. George Sodder, alerted by his wife, sprung into action. He rushed to the fuse box. The lights were out. He tried to get his ladder, usually kept against the house, but it was gone. He attempted to start his 2 coal trucks, hoping to drive to town for help, but neither would turn over, despite working perfectly the day before. Desperate, George and Jennie, along with their 4 older children who had made it out, watched in horror as their home was consumed by flames. By the time the fire department arrived, several hours later, the house was a smoldering ruin. The Sodders were frantic, convinced their 5 children were still inside. But as the debris cooled, a chilling reality set in. There were no remains. No bones. No indication that 5 human beings had perished in that inferno. It defied logic. A fire hot enough to consume an entire structure, yet leave absolutely no biological trace of 5 human beings? It was the first, chilling anomaly in a case that would be riddled with them. The fire chief, a man named F.J. Morris, initially concluded the children had died in the fire, and their bodies had been completely incinerated. But even he seemed to struggle with the finality of his own words. The official explanation felt thin, almost dismissive, to the Sodders. Their instincts screamed otherwise, and soon, a series of peculiar details began to emerge, painting a picture far more sinister than a tragic accident. First, the phone line. Investigations later revealed it had been cut, not burned, before the fire started. Then the ladder, which George had seen earlier in the day, was found discarded in an embankment some 75 feet from the house. And the trucks? Both were found to have been tampered with. Eyewitness accounts further muddied the waters. A bus driver claimed to have seen individuals throwing balls of fire onto the Sodder roof. Other neighbors reported seeing a strange man watching the fire from a distance, or cars parked mysteriously near the property just before the blaze. One woman saw the children in a car with unfamiliar adults a week after the fire. Another woman at a tourist stop between Fayetteville and Charleston claimed to have seen 4 of the 5 children a few days after the fire, accompanied by 2 men and 2 women. She tried to approach them but was prevented by one of the men. The initial coroner's report was equally perplexing. It was conducted quickly, without a thorough investigation, and the official cause of death was declared as fire and suffocation. Yet, the very foundation of this conclusion, the presence of remains, was missing. What was initially dismissed as the fog of trauma slowly began to coalesce into something far more chilling, a pattern. Each strange occurrence, disconnected at first glance, began to paint a mosaic of premeditation. The theory of kidnapping, initially whispered, began to shout. For the Sodders, the absence wasn't silence, but a screaming void. A void they tirelessly tried to fill, fueled by a parent's unyielding hope against all odds. George and Jennie refused to accept the official narrative. They believed their children were alive, taken for reasons unknown. Their quest for answers became their life's work. They put up a massive billboard on Route 16, offering a $5,000 reward for information, later increasing it to $10,000. They placed ads in newspapers across the country, followed every lead, no matter how remote. Their search took them from West Virginia to Florida, to New York, and beyond. One of the most compelling leads came in 1968. Jennie Sodder received a letter with a photograph of a young man, clearly in his 20s, who bore an uncanny resemblance to her son Louis. The back of the photo read, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. The family hired a private detective who traveled to Kentucky, where the letter was postmarked, but the investigation yielded no further answers. The photo was sent to a private investigator and an expert in handwriting and age progression analysis, who both concluded it was indeed Louis Sodder. However, the family never publicly released the findings or pursued this lead further, fearing for Louis's safety. The psychological toll on George and Jennie was immense. They lived with a constant ache, a gnawing question that haunted their every waking moment. Their home, rebuilt after the fire, became a shrine to their lost children, with their photos displayed prominently, a perpetual reminder of their unwavering hope. Their grief wasn't passive, it was a weapon, wielded against the indifference of the official narrative. George Sodder passed away in 1968, Jennie in 1989. Their remaining children and grandchildren continued the search, maintaining the billboard, clinging to the possibility of finally uncovering the truth. 79 years later, the truth of Christmas Eve, 1945, remains elusive. What truly happened to the Sodder children? Were they kidnapped, perhaps due to George Sodder's outspoken anti-Mussolini views, which some speculate may have angered local organized crime elements? Why was the initial investigation so flawed, so seemingly eager to close the case? The complete lack of definitive closure continues to perplex and disturb. The case of the Sodder children isn't just an unsolved mystery, it's a stark reminder of how easily the lines between tragedy, crime, and the inexplicable can blur, leaving us to wonder what really vanishes in the night.